Welcome to Stand Up Memories, another episode with a terrific guest, Harry Freedman. I am Peter Bales. I've never gotten this far before without being interrupted, and this is Jackie the Joke Man
I can't even
Martling.
get a word edgewise.
I know. What do you want to say?
I have nothing to say.
All right. Peter Bales, Jackie Martling.
I would rather
and
hear you say nothing.
Harry Freedman.
So you go on and say nothing. I say nothing, but at least I say nothing.
Harry Freedman, I met first in Florida. He is a terrific stand-up comedian.
You didn't meet him before me.
I think I might have. Where did you meet him? Florida, probably.
I have no memory.
What year did you?
I don't remember when I met him today.
Harry
Hi,
remembers.
Harry.
I met you in Florida at the Diplomat Hotel.
Right.
Eddie Schaefer, an old vaudeville actor, was running a show for about a year in the Little Room. I met you at one of Richie Minervini's one-nighters, and I had a lot of relatives there and stuff, and I met you at
The
one of
Purple
those.
Onion?
No, I can't remember the name of it, but it was before he opened Eastside. It was
Richie
about-
Minervini.
Cinnamon.
It could have been Cinnamon's, maybe.
Richie
Me
Minervini,
and Richie
Long Island. I got to
co-produced that.
clue our audience in on this.
Yeah.
Richie Minervini, Long Island comedian who started comedy, helped to start comedy here on Long Island, and that room probably was Cinnamon in Huntington on a second floor, and that's where Harry met Jackie. And what year would that have been?
79.
Yeah,
Winter
I
of
started in
79.
'79,
yeah.
and you started probably.
I started in '79 in South Florida. Carrie Hoffman, who went on to run Stand Up New York, started a club down there. And Al Romero, a Cuban-American comic, started, and John Schuler started relatively soon, and Mac and Jamie came along a few months later. So the very first time...
Was this at the Diplomat?
No, this was at the Attaché Hotel, which was in Hallandale, not far from the Diplomat.
Because I remember we were doing shows on Long Island, and me and Richie were co-producing some, and Jim Myers, and then at some point Richie took a break and
He started,
disappeared for a couple of months.
He was at the Attaché Hotel, and he was the only pro on that show. And then he started emceeing the show for about 2 months, and then he went back to New York.
And that's when it was down there that he befriended Jackie Mason, who wasn't exactly burning it up at the time. And Richie was going to start the East Side Comedy Club, and he talked Jackie Mason into doing the opening week. And that's...
This is the history of stand-up comedy on Long Island and the South Florida connection. Richie Minervini.
And all those guys, like John Schuler made his way north,
Yeah.
and who else did you say?
Al Romero.
Al Romero.
A Cuban-American and former police officer. And you know what I remember
Wait,
about
wait,
Al
wait.
Romero?
Al? Who was former police officer?
Al Romero. No. Who am I
was not.
thinking? Who am I thinking of? Who was the former police officer? Cuban-American, former police officer. Not
J.J. Romero.
not J.J. Ramirez. No.
JJ was a police officer, yeah.
I don't think so.
He was in the Vice Squad.
But as a Cuban American, I remember you mentioned Castro, and a vein would pulse on his neck.
Oh, Al?
Al Romero.
Oh, yeah.
I think he's still
you
out
should
working,
check that,
right?
Harry.
He's still
I
around.
think he was a former police officer.
No, I don't think so.
We're going to look it up.
I'll tell you why. Because first of all, when he started stand-up comedy, he was working as a salesman. And he actually came up to Long Island for some kind of sales training for like a month or something. So I think I would have known if he was a police officer.
All right, I got to look that up.
And I still stay in touch with him a little bit.
Do you?
Yeah.
He used to start his act in Spanish, and the
I remember
the
so
English
distinctly.
audiences, the American audiences would laugh and giggle, and he'd go, no, and then he'd continue in Spanish and milk it for all it was worth. Very funny opening.
I remember him at the comic strip going up and saying the first few sentences in Spanish, and then he looked at the audience and says, "I know what you're thinking. We got to listen to this crap in here too," which really worked big time in Fort Lauderdale.
yeah.
So Harry, you were part of that South Florida scene when
Yeah.
comedy was just starting out,
Yeah.
and we certainly remember the much missed, great late Dennis Wolfberg.
Oh, yeah.
And he told a story on
yeah.
stage
Yeah.
about going over to your apartment or your girlfriend's
I
apartment.
was dating somebody. And,
Was that your apartment, the story?
It was the girl I was dating, her apartment, so I was staying there for a while. And he comes over, we were writing together, and he goes and uses the bathroom.
Oh, God, I remember the story. So I had no idea.
So the basic story is he goes to use the bathroom, and he's peeing, and sometimes when you're peeing, there's a second stream, and so her pocketbook was next to the bathroom, so he's peeing half in the toilet, half in the pocketbook. So basically the joke was, she gave me chicken, I peed in her pocketbook.
But I can still remember Wolfberg. I was peeing in her pocketbook.
Yeah, the way he would do stuff.
My brother Bobby not solved it, but figured out why that happened. Did you ever figure out why that happened? And I could swear he's absolutely right.
I think it's when you get, how do you put it? I think your organs there have two purposes, so isn't it something to do with that?
He said he was sure that from wearing cotton underwear, and you'd get a piece of lint in the little, whatever, I'm sure there's a medical name for the hole in your penis.
Take the children out of the room.
And with that little piece of lint would separate the streams, and it makes perfect sense because it wouldn't happen to you all the time. If it was a medical procedure.
I'm skeptical of that.
I'm skeptical too.
Yeah.
Do you have any data?
Send your answers to Box 58, Bayville, New York, 11709, and the winner will get to see Harry Freedman perform one of his special shows that he does, and Peter's going to ask him right now what those shows are.
Well, first of all, I'm not sure that's why. Dennis Wolfberg called it a bipedal stream, which I think is making up a word, and I'm not sure that's why we are occasionally bipedal. And but Harry is a terrific stand-up comedian, but he has something that he does that's pretty unique. He does impersonations. But not like an impressionist. He goes up on stage as Dr. Harry Freedman.
Now, is this bad to break this?
I understand most of your audience is in Ireland. This will have no impact. and there's 1,000 people watching this or so?
We have lots of people watching this
Let's say
show,
there's
thousands.
1 million people. Nobody remembers.
Okay.
Right.
I was on WFAN a couple of times as a fake sports fitness doctor. I was on Tim McCarver's radio show. I was a fake sports fitness doctor who also helped teams and athletes to cheat in sports. Like spitballs, you drink more milk, it creates phlegm, things like that. So people, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
It's just fun.
And
Proceed.
So, I'm just going to tell our audience what Harry is saying is he performs as a stand-up as Dr. Harry Freedman, a doctor who also does stand-up, and it's very, very funny. But in the corporate world, you can hire Harry to do put-ons of business people. You want to elaborate on that?
Basically, I was on the road about 150 days a year, like year 5 to 10 in my career, and I'm like, I didn't know this was the deal. And it was like, it was exciting and interesting, but it was also kind of lonely at times and stuff. I was single, sometimes it was really cool, but sometimes, I worked with a guy in Alabama who was stuck next to each other for a week, and I hated the guy, and it's like, this is a nightmare.
It becomes incredible drudgery.
Yeah, you have great weeks, you have, whatever. So anyway, a friend of mine who you guys know, a comic named Jeff Justice, he got hired to do a corporate put-on.
Wow, I haven't heard his name in
He lives in
a long
Atlanta,
time.
and he does corporate shows, but not put-ons, and he also teaches comedy classes at the Punchline. So he got hired to do one, and he starts telling me about it, and I said, you're going to give it away too soon. You got to suspend their belief. So he said, help me write it. So 3 weeks later, he sent me a video. I was like, I got it. This is me. This is what I want to do.
Like straight stuff for X amount until they're completely convinced.
You basically do it. What I've learned how to do, initially when I started doing these, I was serious for like a minute or two, but you dig a comic hole. It's like a balance. So what I learned to do is I learned to be funny without talking about anything to do with the company. Hey, it's nice to be here, blah, 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 and joke around about, the place or joke around about stuff. And You know,
like a straight speaker would do. Like
to
they
lighten
say,
the
a
mood.
straight speaker always introduced with a
lighten
few
the mood.
laughs,
Yeah.
and then everybody
Yeah.
wants to hear what you got to say.
So, and then I learned the stuff like I'm studying for an exam. I literally go through the website. I talk to them. I send them a question. I talk to them. I learn names. I learn personality quirks. I learn everything about the industry that I can, everything about the company. And then I start teasing with stuff that's real. So they go, and this guy knows his stuff. And I usually have gone to Harvard. That's something I pride myself on.
That's a fantasy that
Yeah.
you're.
if you're going to make it up,
No, you got to
you
go.
got to go for it.
So
I'm
let me
off-
just say to the audience,
Yeah.
corporate events that pay more than your comedy club.
Oh, yeah.
They hire Harry to come in as an executive or a professional or an expert, and he does the put on, and it looks real, but it gets weirder and weirder as you go along. Is that fair?
Well, weirder and weirder,
And
but
funnier and
funnier and
funnier
funnier.
and funnier, yeah.
The game plan is to get them laughing up front, and then the transition point where it's like I'm getting into their stuff. There's a point where they're going, where is he going? And now I'm basically separating my image of deadpan seriousness from the material, which keeps going further and further out. So
And slowly but surely, this guy and then this woman, they're like, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute.
the
You know,
average
in their
per-
mind, you
and
know.
the average person says 20 minutes in is when they kind of figure out, like, I don't think he's real. But I do have people coming up to me every so often. Are you really starting out here next week, or are you really consulting?
They
to
never quite get on the.
even though I reveal it at the end. I actually say it, but
But
here's
they
what-
still don't believe you at the
here's,
end.
here's what I've learned, and you can see this in society. Packaging and presentation is sometimes more important than what you're saying. If you package it right, the head of the company or somebody important introduces you as real, they will believe that longer than they should.
They bought it, and it stays bought.
For most of them figure it out, and then I say that I'm a fake very towards the end, you know, at the 35, 40-minute mark. I joke about that, you know, and I joke about, you know, they hired me so they could clean out your desks and bring in all the new trainees or something like that to distract you. But basically, I love doing the writing. It's a pain in the neck, but I really do love going up there like with all that stuff. And I have a podium and I have my notes. I rehearse the hell out of it. And I screen it with the clients. So like, okay, can this guy take a joke or not? Is this okay?
Has anybody not taken a joke?
Yes.
Tell me about that's gotta happen.
That has to happen.
Early on, very early on, I did 2 shows for Huntington Hospital. I was still learning what I was doing. And I was doing too much roasting of the guy who was supposed to be roasted, and he was retiring. And I went into much too long on each person. I was killing. I was absolutely killing. But in the middle of it, this woman who was working there, a nurse or something, broke down in tears, said, "Come on, what are you doing? We love this guy." And she broke down in tears in front of the whole crowd.
So this
The person complaining, you weren't attacking her, you were attacking her friend, and she
I
was like,
wasn't attacking
Well,
him. I was-
whatever
I was
you'd call it.
roasting him
Yeah.
as part of my thing.
Don't pick on my friend.
Yeah.
So she had no idea.
I think she was emotional because he was retiring and this and that, and she
she
had
didn't
no
get
idea that I was a fake.
she didn't get it.
She didn't get it. No.
That's gotta.
Yeah.
That's funny now,
Yeah,
but at the
yeah.
time it must have been.
No, it was, you know, I was stumped at that moment, like, what do I do now? And I forget how it ended. I just know I was having a great show until that moment.
You know, it's
Jackie-
so odd. A couple were both divorced, and they were from Long Island, and they were getting married. They had both gotten divorced, had gone through the real fancy wedding, the family, blah, 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 and they were getting married in Washington, D.C., and they hired me to come down there, and they gave me all the information because they wanted me to roast the members of their family.
Right.
And I had no idea that no one was in on it except that couple. And I got up and I started making fun of Aunt Judy, who was so cheap, and little Charlie that won't come out of his room. And at some point you realize they're the only ones laughing.
Right.
You know, and just, you know, the egg on your face and like, you know, talk about take the money and run.
Yeah.
But like it's very uncomfortable. You know, even if it was just that one woman, you're still like, you know, what do you do?
Now you know the famous story about Johnny Carson doing 2 shows in Las Vegas, and the manager said, Johnny, during your show, drop these names in.
Oh, no,
Everybody's going to laugh. You know about
I
this
never
story.
heard this.
Oh, yeah. During your show, drop these names in. Everybody's going to crack up. So Johnny drops the names in, and there's no response. No response at all. And he gets off stage. He says to the manager, there's no response. Why did you make me drop those names in? And the manager goes, oh, I meant drop them into the second show, not the first show.
Which is just,
which is just
which
amazing.
is just great, just great.
So now, Harry, you go up in your stand-up
Right.
as Dr. Harry Freedman.
Right.
And it's very funny because this doctor is out of his mind if he's a real doctor, and you play a real doctor.
People think I am real.
I'm a real
Any
doctor.
Yeah.
like specific, like a gynecologist or a podiatrist?
People ask me that. When women ask me, what kind of doctor, I just generally go, what do you need? And if you want a free OB/GYN exam, I have equipment in the trunk of my car. But no, I keep it vague, but then during my set, I mix in the fact that I do surgery. I actually did 5 operations today, and I had a good day. I was 2 for 5. And the other 3 didn't have enough insurance, so the hell with them. Whenever
great.
I do surgery, I use a lot of extra anesthesia. This way, even if I screw it up, I'm so stoned I don't really care what happens. So I go on and on with that kind of stuff, and it's a lot of fun.
And
It's a lot
people
of fun.
figure it out at
No, most people aren't sure, and a lot of people still think I'm real because it's like a doctor could joke. There are doctor comics.
And
as we know.
everybody's
There are.
so nervous going to the doctor or getting an operation or
Yeah.
something. It's a great release, whether
Harry,
What happened is I started doing corporate put-ons, and it was like, okay, I can do this. I'm doing every industry. I've done finance. I've done tech. I've done medical. I've done 3 nuclear facilities, which is pretty cool.
wow.
And so I finally said, I got to figure something out for my act. Now, obviously, we all know Jim Myers, who started becoming the German. Now, I don't know that directly influenced me, but who's to say? But I finally said, you know what? I could be a doctor. I could be a convincing doctor. And I also had an angioplasty around the same time, so I wrote a lot of medical jokes. So
Harry,
it fit.
it
Wow.
fit. I never told you this story, but I swear it's true. I was an outpatient. I had a cyst on my thumb removed, and
Somebody
I had to.
asked you if they knew me.
Okay, here's the story.
Okay.
So I was under, and it's just not a big operation, but they put me to sleep, and they operate on my thumb, and you're in
You
recovery
got anesthesia so they could
for
take a
thumb
boo-boo off your
my thumb. All right, and you wake up from whatever the Michael Jackson juice is. You wake up and you're out of it. You're out of it. You just slowly wake up. And my doctor comes over and he goes, the surgery went great. And then my doctor knew that I was a comedian.
Right.
And he had asked me, he goes, I want you to talk to another doctor. I mean, another doctor? He brings over a woman who's another doctor in the facility. And he goes, talk to him. And I'm totally out of it. And she says to me, I saw a comedian who was a doctor. And I want his name because I'm going to report him. I'm going to report him to the medical board. And I'm coming off drugs. I'm like, oh, he's not a real doctor. He's not a real doctor. And she goes, are you sure? I go, no, he's a comedian.
What a great advertisement for
When
your
was
act.
this?
This was a couple years ago.
Yeah.
He's not a real doctor.
Why didn't you tell me this?
I forgot to tell you. I've told other people. It's so
What a
funny.
great
I want to meet the
advertisement.
woman.
Oh, she thought you were. Another doctor was so offended that the doctor would talk like that, initialing somebody's.
What Harry doesn't know is she's here today.
This is your.
I was on WFAN once, and somebody called up the station. I got a bunch of reaction, which was great. Some people wanted to buy the book, Cut to Win, as a sports doctor. And somebody called up and complained, this guy is a disgrace to the medical profession, blah, blah, blah. And they gave him my number, and I talked to the guy, and he said, I may take legal action. I said, I would really like it if you did. There would be no greater publicity if you sued me.
Fantastic.
And then everybody finds out that I'm a fake and they listen to the tape. Please sue me.
Right, and how great, if
There
it's
is-
that convincing.
There is a Harry Freedman story that is very famous on Long Island among the comedians. And I hope it's true. I hope it's not apocryphal. I hope it's true. And you'll...
Heart attack?
Heart attack!
Yeah.
Heart attack!
true.
Listen to this. So, okay, let me explain to the audience and then I'll hand off.
I do not know this.
Okay, Harry is up on stage and he's performing his stand-up as Dr. Harry Freedman. And he's in the middle of his act, and take it from there.
Yap Hank across the street from the fire department, like a 50-seater or something. And I'm closing the show and it's going really well. And about 30 minutes in, this guy starts like, in his chair, he goes back and it's like, is he drunk? And he's right next to me, he's right in front of me.
Jeez.
And it wasn't, I immediately sensed, I don't think he's drunk. This is worse than drunk, because his chair went backwards and he fell on the ground and his wife or whatever is there. So everybody halts. Everybody, the show just halts. So a woman in the crowd, there's like a moment and I'm looking and I'm going, what do I do?
But you're on stage as Dr. Harry Freedman.
And I'm like, okay, I have like seconds, and a woman yells, well, come on, you're a doctor. So I immediately said, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not really a doctor. And I was thinking, here's what went through my mind in the 5 seconds. I used to be a lifeguard, and I saved a woman's life once. She passed out in the pool, and I gave her mouth to mouth. She got sick of me, and that's how I met my wife. But anyway, I saved her life. And anyway, so now I'm sitting there, like 3 seconds, you're thinking all these things, and I knew, like, okay, you know, Newsday cover, you know, comic doctor, and the guy dies. So we were across the street from the fire department. So the fire department got there in like 2 minutes with oxygen, and the show's over, and the owner comes, what'd you do to my audience? You know, what'd you do to my audience member, whatever? He was joking. And
but did you jump down and give him mouth to mouth?
No, I did nothing. I'm not gonna. What am I gonna do?
But you couldn't really end your act because you had to say to the audience, I'm not a real doctor.
No, I stood up there, but basically I stood up there and it was like I don't remember what I said.
Tried to keep the calm.
Yeah, exactly. I remained calm. I wasn't like panicking, but I also knew like don't do anything physically here. So they got the oxygen on him, and then an ambulance was there like within 5 minutes because the fire department was right across the street. I heard later the guy did have a heart attack and he did survive. And basically, that's the story. Another time at the Bagel Boss, a woman got sick when Chris Monty was on, and I was emceeing the show as a doctor. And I forget what happened, but she was, you know, I forget if there was an ambulance or whatever. But again, I didn't have to say anything that time because Chris Monty was on stage, so I just hid in the back.
Well, I think it's something in your act that's causing stress or some sort of a physical
It's only
reaction.
one time.
Well, twice.
No, Chris Monty was
Do you
on.
really think somebody would give
Okay.
allow themselves to have a heart attack just to get out of here in Harry's act? I don't think so.
Thank you very much.
We always ask this on the show because most of the time, stand-up comedy is so much fun and the nights are so great. But comedians like to talk about when it went wrong.
It's never gone wrong, ever.
Ever.
Never.
Anybody who knows Harry knows that's not true. And everybody
We all have
has
our
that
favorite horror shows.
The favorite horror show.
I'll tell you the worst.
I can't think of anything worse than somebody being up there as a fake doctor
I
and
had
somebody having a heart attack. I mean,
No, I had a good show. He had a heart attack. Too bad.
right.
That's not my fault.
It's apples and
I
oranges.
made him laugh. I made the crowd laugh. People came up to me who were very funny. It's too bad the guy had a heart attack. I did my job. The worst was about a year in at the Diplomat, held about 80 people, and Al Romero went on before me, and he did an hour because he had an agent from upstate Florida there. And I had 20 relatives there sitting up front. And he did a friggin' hour. And he was my friend. I was like, what are you doing?
He wore them out.
He destroyed them. He didn't have an hour. He had 20 minutes, and then he was talking to people for 40 minutes. So by the time I got up there, they were dead, and my 20 relatives, like, you know, and they're in the front. They seated them all in the front. And I was not at any level of experience near where I knew how to handle that.
So he did his funny 20 minutes up front,
And then he did 40
stretched
minutes
it
of
with
crowd
40
work.
minutes of.
To impress an agent that he could do time.
A serious violation of comedy etiquette.
And then he was defending himself, and I've never fully told him, you know, like, what are you doing? I never really said that to him, and maybe I will after this show.
Well, maybe he can
So
watch
what?
this.
So you're.
I bombed, and my relatives were like looking at me like, oh, this is what you're doing? Because I quit law school 3 semesters in. My father wanted me to be a lawyer. He was a judge and a lawyer, and he was very prominent in Nassau. And it was like, oh, you go to law school or shovel blank for all I care. So I was pushed into that, and I went to law school, and I was like, I don't want to do this. I want to do something creative. I have comedy inside me somewhere. And he was a very good public speaker, and he was very funny. So I got some of that from him. But I took it into my own way from a very neurotic, struggling childhood. So it was like, I have to do something with this, because I look at the world differently than most people.
Good for you. Good for you. That's a creative way to use childhood trauma. And I got my comedy from my father. I think my baseline comedy from my father. I can totally relate to that. And Harry, look for Dr. Harry Freedman whenever he's advertised. He's such a funny stand-up comedian. And you don't use Harry Freedman when you're doing a put-on at a...
I change my name most of the time so they can't Google me.
Right.
So
right.
I either change the spelling a little bit, or I change the name. I did.
You don't do like a wacky Mad Magazine play on words type.
No. I have to be corporate straight. I also do roasts now where I come in pretending to be like a relative of 23andMe, or the guy's doctor, or something where it's like from work. The best thing I ever
So you're a ringer.
I'm a ringer.
Ringer.
The best in that situation was this woman hired me to roast her multi-millionaire real estate husband, who had been in jail twice in his life. In the 1960s, he was the boy wonder. He was in Life magazine. He made like 20-something million dollars. He moved the money around incorrectly. He fled to Brazil. He started converting currency. He made $100,000 in a year in Brazil. Came back, served 2 years at Rikers, traded cigarettes at Rikers. There's a book about the guy. Traded cigarettes at Rikers to get by. Got out, made a fortune again, went back to jail when he was 60, got out, met a couple of partners, made a fortune in real estate. He was 85 years old, his wife was 60, and he had married her 30 years early, and you could tell when she was young she was stunning.
Right.
So she hires me to fly to Cabo. And I'm staying in the suite that Governor Richardson's staying in the next night. So I had a full-time butler, I got a free massage. And that night I am introduced as somebody from a real estate ethics board giving him an award.
And he's 85.
He's 85. And he's in great shape. And they flew like 70 of their closest friends from Arizona where they lived. Everybody went to Arizona and they chartered a plane and they flew them all to Cabo to stay at this incredible, this was the best resort of Cabo I've been in, and I've been in about 3 or 4 of them. And so I was joking about, you know, it's nice to see him here without the ankle bracelet for a change. And it was a weird setup. It was outdoors. It was kind of, they had like they had this singer from France come in and after me. But it went well. It went well. Not an easy situation, but it went well. That was a great gig. That was just a great gig.
Wow. You got to come on again with more stories. This has been so much fun.
And you got to give us the guy's name so we can,
I think he passed when he was about 92 or so. That gig was about 15 years ago.
But it's an interesting story. I like that,
Yeah. I've met a lot of people, and I've been sitting next to people like Michael Dell, or I've sat next to, did the American Bankers Association, 600 bank presidents.
And on the other end of the spectrum, you've performed a lot at Bagel Boss.
No, I do open mics at crappy little dive bars and stuff.
Right.
And so this business, one night you're royalty, and the next night you're a little crappy dive bar with 6 comics or 8 comics that know all your jokes.
You're only as good as your last. I used to go crazy because the Florida comic strip was 1 show a night, but 7 nights a week.
Right.
And we'd work to an empty house on Monday, and then a few more people on Tuesday, and a few more, and then all of a sudden you get to Friday is packed,
Right.
and Saturday is packed, and everybody kills. But then you do Sunday night to 12 people, and
know.
that's the flavor in your mouth when you go
I
home
know.
instead of the joy of the
I know.
Saturday
I
kill.
know.
It's like it just
I
lets
know.
all the air out of your
And you
tire.
carry that into your Sunday show. I'm great. And then in the Sunday show, it's like,
Not so fast.
in the Sunday
yes,
show,
yes.
you got to get psyched up in a different way. And it's very difficult to
Yes.
get psyched
Yes.
up
Right,
again.
Your
for that.
40-minute show is all of a sudden 6 minutes. You know?
Oh,
yeah.
Harry, you've been great.
Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for coming on Stand Up Memories.
Who do I hand the
no, it's free.
the edibles to?
No. Oh,
I already did mine.
this has been Doctor, because it seems appropriate to call you that, Harry, and I know your middle name, Harry Dilbert Freedman.
It's my stage name.
That's his stage name.
My real name is Biff Wilson.
It's a great joke.
Did he say Dilbert?
Dilbert is my middle name, and Harry Dilbert was my grandfather, who I never met. He owned about 80 Dilbert's grocery stores back in the 30s and the 40s. He died. The brothers destroyed the business. My mom never saw it dying.
On that
So
Now,
depressing
isn't
note,
Dilbert
I
a
coulda had
comic
money.
strip? Is Dilbert
Yes.
a comic strip?
Yes, yeah.
How'd they destroy 80?
The two brothers just basically ran it into the ground.
I thought you were minding the store. I
Yeah.
thought you were minding.
No. I don't think they got along, and he was the glue. And when he died, they took over, and they also did some shady stuff. I'm hearing. I have a great aunt who I've learned more. Time's up, so let's go.
No.
Okay.
We got
Well,
Harry's
you'll
coming
come back for sure.
You got to come back, man. Harry Dilbert Freedman, or better known as Dr. Harry Freedman, or better known as Totally Fake.
I like Dr. Dilbert. That has a
Dr.
nice
Dilbert,
ring to it.
Harry Dilbert Freedman. I have been Peter Bales. This has been Jackie the Joke Man Martling, and the podcast is called Stand Up Memories, and that's really what we do.
Thanks for tuning in. And
Thank
this
you.
was,
We'll see you next time.
We're all going to die soon, right?
That was a pretty good episode.
A new episode every Wednesday with me, Peter Bales, Jackie the Joke Man Martling, comedians, interesting people. Leave a comment. We'll get. What am I saying?
I don't know.
We're gonna get back to you. We will respond to your comment.
Standupmemories.com. If you go there, it shows all the different
All
platforms.
Spotify. We're on everything.
Every Wednesday.
Stand Up Memories.
Every Wednesday.
A new episode.